Joining us now, Washington correspondent for Spectrum News, Kevin Frey. Kevin, today the city's election board is running the next round of primary results. So do you expect that we're actually going to make this official for Mamdani here?
It seems there's a good chance. And I mean, look, even as they run through these tabulations, because it's called ranked choice voting, basically the lowest person on the totem pole, they get eliminated, their votes get redistributed, and they go up the list until there is a winner that's past the 50% mark. At the end of the day, even if this takes a few computations, I mean, look, the third ranking individual, Brad Lander, who is the comptroller of New York City, he got about 11% of the vote. He cross-endorsed with Mamdani. So even if you assume that only a good chunk of those votes go to Mamdani, that's enough to get him over the 50% mark, plus all the other stragglers down the list.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting dynamic, both before people went to vote and now as we're watching these votes actually be tabulated. But the other game that people are playing here is gaming out if Mamdani actually does win in November, the way that President Trump is already setting the scene for how he would react to him and how they might be dealing with each other. When you talk to your sources in New York, how are they gaming that out? Because I know it's a conversation that New Yorkers on the Hill are certainly having.
And look, this fits into a larger pattern, quite frankly, of Trump really focusing in on his old home state for, as one person once described it to me, retribution. I think that was former Congressman Steve Israel told me that. And whether it be going after congestion pricing in lower Manhattan, whether it be focusing in on Eric Adams and what has been alleged to be a quid pro quo when it comes to getting him out of charges in exchange for him holding up some of the president's immigration policies. Trump is much more aggressively this round in the Oval Office, kind of putting his hands and finger on the scale when it comes to things going on in New York. Look, we've already seen Governor Kathy Hochul, who, by the way, has not yet endorsed Mamdani, come out and say that, look, we're going to stand up for New York regardless of what the president decides to do. But the president does have, you know, power to influence things in New York, and that's certainly something that the New York Democrats are very cognizant of.
Can you talk about the complicating factors for Hochul, who, again, is up for re-election, is facing a primary challenge, is likely then in a general election to face someone like Elise Stefanik, who is marching her way towards her own run for this office? What is the complicating role of someone like Mamdani in New York for Hochul, who has to run a wide range, politically speaking, for a campaign in New York State?
Yeah, and it's not just Hochul. It's also some of these Democrats in some of these competitive congressional districts around New York City, especially Laura Gillen, Tom Suozzi, that have come out and expressed some, shall we say, hesitation about Mamdani being the standard bearer of the Democratic Party in New York City. But look, New York is kind of two states jammed into one. You have downstate New York City, the more progressive 5 boroughs, and then upstate New York, which is a lot more conservative, lots of pockets of blue in some of these bigger cities, but largely much more red. And so Hochul has to do this kind of creative balancing act where her polling was not great for the last several years. It has steadied, it has climbed a little bit, but she still is a bit anxious, in no small part because about 4 years ago, during the last, or excuse me, 2 years ago, during the last time she was on the ballot, it was actually 4 years ago, I can't do math this early in the morning, she was blamed for some of the congressional races going the other way because her polling and her election results were so low. And so there is a fear of that sort of repetition. I should say there's some new polling out today that suggests that she's at least double digits ahead of the Republican challengers in a hypothetical head-to-head matchup, but there's still a lot of undecided voters.
Yeah, that's going to be a really interesting race to watch. And Kevin, don't worry, we are not big on math on Way Too Early, only when it comes to calculating congressional votes, which is why I ask you this next question. The SALT issue, state and local tax deduction, is going to be huge for Congress in this upcoming reconciliation bill. Very quickly, what's your read on how the House is going to react to the Senate pieces of this?
Ironically, it seems that the SALT piece is going to be kind of the least controversial of the things that could come back from the Senate right now, because it seems a lot of the SALT caucus guys are a little more on board with what's going on. There are some individuals that are still having reservations. Congressman Nick LaLota is still very aggressively saying this isn't good enough. But you've seen folks like Congressman Mike Lawler, who has been beating this drum since the very beginning, saying that this deal is good, which is basically lifting the cap but sunsetting it after 5 years, so it's a much more temporary sort of raising.
Yeah, I didn't think that SALT was going to be one of the more easy barriers to overcome between the Senate and the House. But here we are, those negotiations. We'll see where they land when the House actually votes on this thing. Got to get through the Senate first. Washington correspondent for Spectrum News, Kevin Frey, thank you for getting up early with us and doing math.